welcome back. This is the Big Sew Along and I'm Ginny, and today we are talking about Diane Ericson's River Tunic Part 2. So for today I promised a knit version of the River Tunic, which is what I'm wearing today. But before we get to that, I wanted to talk a little bit more about the woven version, and in fact you could do this on the knit version too. So the one we did last week was the scoop neck version, which is the same one that I'm wearing today. However, somebody asked if we could go over some of the other neckline and cuff variations. So I made this one, which is, this is in a silk and cotton voile. And this one has the boat neckline, and it has a longer sleeve that's narrowed a little bit with a slit in the arm here. I don't know if you can see that, and a button on the cuff. So before we get to the knit version, I'm going to show you a quick tutorial on how to do this neckline and this sleeve version, and then we'll get back to the knit version. So to change the we're going to make our sleeves on this one a little bit longer, and we're going to make them a little bit narrower. We're also going to do a little bit of change here at the hem. This is a sleeve. This is our cutout opening. These are the notches where we would put a pocket. I'm not going to put a pocket on this one though. And then this is the extension on the hem. The hem is this way. Our fold is over there. Okay. My pattern piece ends right here. And on these two edges, I just extended that line to the edge of my fabric. I'm going to want to use the whole width of this. If you don't want to make it that long, you can extend it as far as you want. So let's start with the sleeves. This one is going to get a seam at the shoulder, so I need a 1/2 inch there, and I need a 1/2 inch seam allowance here. I want this to be 11 inches finished, which means 5.5 inches on each side, and then I need 1/2 inch seam allowance on each end. So I'm going to make this 6.5 inches, if that makes sense, from here. So 6.5 inches down is right here. And I'm actually just going to put a little mark so you guys can see it. That's 6.5 inches. That's where I want my sleeve opening to end. I'm going to give myself a 1 inch hem allowance. So I'm going to fold this up. This edge, I have both pieces of it here. I'm folding that up 1 inch. And I'm just going to pin that down. And my 6.5 inch mark is right here. Now to get this curve correct, I'm going to place my ruler, my curvy ruler, right there at the curve, and I'm just going to angle it up, right, so it comes right to the edge here. And if it doesn't fit perfectly, it's fine. You just want to maintain as much of that curve as you can. Now I'm going to draw mine out, but you can just cut it. I'm going right over this fold. Okay. Now, for this part down here, I want this to extend further down so this side angle doesn't come out so far. You can do it this way, but I just chose to do it this way. So I want this to be about 1 inch away from the edge. So I'm going to draw this straight down like this. I'm just going to extend this down like this, and then just for that last inch I'm going to go straight across just like it was up here. Okay, so now that is my new cutting line. And you will see when I cut this like this, get rid of this. Now when we open up this flap, this will have a little angle in it, just a little one, but that's going to give us enough room to fold this up into our sleeve when we're done. For this boat neckline, I'm just going to put my pattern back down here. I'm going to make a little notch through both of my layers right here at the right here at the edge of my neck on my pattern. And then on my sleeve line across the top here, I'm going to go down 12 inches from that notch and make another notch. I've marked it right here with a chalk and a pin. It's going to go right there. And again, I want to go through both of my layers. Okay, so this is the top of my dress. And I have finished this top edge on both of my pieces. And I've pinned it together here at my notches. So this will be my neck opening. And then down here, I pinned it at my second notch on the sleeve. And then again on this side at the sleeve where my second notch is. Now I'm going to go to the sewing machine and I'm just going to sew between these two pins at a 1/2 inch seam allowance. Make sure you back tack on both sides. And then same thing on this side, just between these two pins. So you're going to leave the neck part open, which is the center, and you're going to leave everything on the after this pin, you're also going to leave open. Okay, here's the top. This is where it's sewn, right here and right here. The middle is open, like that. Now, on the sleeves, I'm going to open them out like this. One of these is going to be the front and one is going to be the back. We're just going to call this one the front. I've pressed my hem allowances up 1 inch on all 4 sleeve pieces. I'm going to turn this right side out now. And on my sleeves, on one side, on the front side, I am going to put a little button loop, and I'm going to lay it with the button loop facing inwards towards the shirt. And I'm going to lay it right on the edge where that, where my serging is coming off, where the hem fold is. And I'm going to fold that hem up over the front. So it's folded to the wrong side and we have our little button loop sandwiched in between there. And I'm going to pin that together. Just going to pin that little, make sure I get my button loop in there. And then on the back side, I'm going to fold the hem up on that same fold line. I'm going to fold it to the front and I'm going to pin that down as well. There. Now I'm going to go to the sewing machine and I'm going to sew both of these pieces down, and I'm just going to sew the hem portion. So I'm going to sew it a 1/2 inch away from this top edge, and I'm going to sew just to this, just to where the hem ends, to the, sorry, from the top of my hem to the bottom of my hem on both pieces. And then you want to do that on the other side as well. So now that we have our little loop sewn in there and these hem edges sewn, we're just going to flip those to the right side like that and give them a good press. And you do the same thing on the other side. Then you're gonna, I'll show you from the inside here. I'm gonna open this up. And all along this edge, our top shoulder seam, you're gonna press your seam open all the way down. It's our neck hole. Here's our sleeve over here. And you're going to top stitch or edge stitch both sides of the seam allowance to your dress. Right along, I'm going to do it, I have mine serged, so I'm going to do it right along here. This should be a 1/2 inch fold over, so that's probably, you know, close to 3/8 or something. All the way down on both sides. That's going to hold your seam allowance in place, and it's going to make your neckline nice and clean. Now on my sleeves, I forgot to say, I used the selvage edge of my fabric, so I did not need to finish this edge. But if you did not use the selvage edge of your fabric, you're going to want to finish this edge before you put your button loops on and do all of that. Now, once you have that seam sewn down on the front and the back sides, you're going to just sew your side seams like you would on the regular tunic. But just remember, when you fold this right sides together, you have your hem sleeve, no, your sleeve hem pressed in. So just be sure you open that out like that to sew your side seam, and then you'll fold that all back in and hem your sleeve. This is our finished sleeve, our little loop and button that we made. But I just wanted to show you that if you don't want to, if you want to do the slit, but you don't want to do the loop, you could just as easily put the buttonhole on the actual cuff of the shirt and just fold it over a little. And then you could also put, if you wanted to, you could put button loops up the opening, like 3 or 4, or you could make this opening longer or shorter. Okay, so that is the boat neck and button cuff variation on this. Now in this pattern there are also directions for a V-neck variation. Now the V-neck, she doesn't give you, she gives you ideas on how to do the V-neck. You're gonna have to do a facing probably for the V-neck. You could do a bound V-neck, but I find that difficult and it doesn't really ever, for me, it doesn't come out very well. So I would do a facing for that one. She also gives you a couple of ideas for different cuff variations, for doing some pleating at the cuffs, and things like that. But you could really go crazy with that. So the other thing is she has the sleeveless version, which is the first version that I made. And I'm going to show you that really quickly. So before we get to the sleeveless version, I just wanted to show you up close on this one. I put 2 pleats in the front. I measured, I think they're about 2.5 inches either side of the center front. And I just put it on and measured roughly how much I wanted to bring it in. And I made 2 pleats, they're the same size, on both sides. And then I sewed them down about 2 inches from here to here. I pressed them open from the back so that it's like a box pleat. And then I just stitched along both edges to keep it nice and flat. Now, to decorate this, I have a bunch of these plain mother of pearl buttons, and I think I'm going to put those on that little square where I've sewn that down. And then over here on the sleeve, I'm going to put more of them along this center sleeve seam to make that more of a, whoops, more of a design detail like on my sleeves, like that. Okay, now let's get to the sleeveless version. So this is my sleeveless version, and she's more of a jumper. She has really wide armholes, so obviously I'm going to wear this over something. And she has an asymmetrically pleated neckline that I did after I bound my neck. On this one, I also used the binding on the side slits, and I just did a regular flat hem. The other thing you can do, now this is the widest armhole that she gives you on this pattern. There's one that comes up a little more. And if you really wanted to make it more of a slip, you could easily do that by just making that armhole smaller again. Okay, now for our knit version, the one I did is this one, and I just used sort of inexpensive nylon spandex fabric, I think is what this is. It's very drapey and it's very stretchy, so it comes out considerably bigger than the woven version. Now you can do a couple of things. On this one, I didn't alter the size of the pattern at all. I actually made the pattern as it's drawn out in the, when you get it. I didn't take it in at all. And then I did some pleating in my neckline after I put my binding on. For this one I used I think this is 1.5 inches, which is quite wide. And I use the same width for my cuffs on my sleeve. Now, I did do a tutorial on how to put the neckline on, but I somehow erased it. So what I'm going to do is link for you my very first video. I'll link it below. At 9 minutes and 15 seconds into that video, I go over how to put the binding on. So just, if you need help putting the binding on, just refer back to that. I think I show it in an armhole, but it's the same for the neck in that. putting it on. Now, okay, I'm just going to use a different light. I don't know what's going on. Okay, so to establish how long to make your binding, she doesn't have a pattern piece for that in this pattern. So what I do is I measure the neckline 3/8 of an inch down from the cut edge. I measure the whole neckline and I multiply that by 0.75. So you want the band to be roughly 3/4 the length of your actual neckline at the seam line, not at the cut edge. I add my seam allowance to both sides of that and turn it into a band. For my arms, because this is pretty wide, especially in this super stretchy drapey fabric, what I did was measured how far around I wanted this to come on my arm, and I used that as the measurement for the width of my band, the length of my band. Now, like I said, this one, I made this 1.5 inches deep, so it was 3 inches wide, folded in half, plus seam allowances. That is a little deep. I thought I would like it better on this, and I do. It's fine. I have some issues with this particular one, but they are all because of my, this was my first try doing this with a knit, so I had some issues more with using my new cover stitch machine than with anything else. Okay, so knit variation. So you have, just be aware that if I had made this in a more stable knit, it would have come out smaller and I would have had less pleating in the front and in the back. I'm going to show you a quick tutorial here. It's not really even a tutorial. I'm just going to show you how I determined how and where to put my pleats. So this mannequin is the same size as me, although maybe a little taller. Anyway, you can see that because this knit is like a super stretchy knit, I cut the exact same size that I cut before, but it's obviously going to be too big here in the neckline. I'm going to move this up a little bit. Sorry guys, so you can see a little bit better. Now, if you use a more stable knit, you can just finish this the way you did our other ones. On the knit one, in Diane's blog, what she did was something like this, where she pulled this excess fabric up and over like this, creating a pleat like that. However, and it gives it then a sort of an asymmetrical neckline. I hope you can see that. And then she just stitched it down here, straight down like this. However, because my neckband is so big, when I pull mine over like that, it pulls up the sleeve too much. So I came up with a different fold that I thought was really cool. I really liked it like this, like just off center here on the right hand side. And I folded it up about, so the piece of fabric that I have pinched is about 1 inch. So it's about 1 inch on either side, right? So that's 2 inches. And then I just folded it over to the center like that. Then I just pinned it in place like this, right through all the layers. And on this one, I was thinking that I would pin it down, pin this flap that I've folded over, pin it down to about the waist, which is roughly right here. So I'm going to put a pin in there. Now, I'm going to try this on before I do any sewing, but my debate was whether or not I should do the same thing on this side, like this, and have almost like an Art Deco-y kind of square neckline, in which case I'm going to want to measure and make sure that those two folds are the same distance apart and the same width. And I do like that. I was thinking originally that I would want it to be asymmetrical, so I would just do one on one side and one on the back, but then I think that that's going to make my neckline is still going to be too big on the side that I don't pull in. So I think that is probably what I'm going to end up doing. Something like that. Could also, I mean, obviously the back is still, that just needs steaming out. The back is still going to be a little bit big, so I will probably do, I think maybe I'll just do one in the back and just do it sort of off center like that. This one I think I will match up with the neck. And I think I will stitch this one down a little bit too, but not as far. So maybe down to here, 5 or 6 inches down. Now what I'm going to do, I was going to use my cover stitch machine to make stitching detail, but if I do that, I probably want it to go all the way to the bottom so that it's continuous. Otherwise I'm going to have my stitching stop right here. And I would do the same thing on the front and just do 2 continuous lines of stitching all the way down and do it with my cover stitch machine. Alternatively, I could just sew this together on the inside along this seam line right here and cut the excess off on the back, which would also work. That would look like this. So this is the pleat that I have pinned in here, and I would sew it on this side, the inside, and obviously I would measure this to make sure it's even all the way down, or as far down as I'm going to go. So you could do it like this and then just serge off the excess and press that seam allowance towards the taller side of your neckline so it doesn't show. You may still want to top stitch that down, but that could also work. So on this one, I think I'm going to do it on the outside, and I'm going to do, I think I'm going to use my cover stitch machine and make a line of stitching that just goes all the way down my dress. On the sleeves, all I did was, because this has got almost like a kimono, not quite a kimono sleeve, but kind of, it's like a wide sleeve. I did end up shortening my sleeves by about 2 or 3 inches. And instead of using the 3/4 length to determine the band for my sleeves, that did not bring it in enough. So on this one, get rid of all these pins, I ended up making my knit bands, not quite, but almost half the distance of my sleeve opening, and that gave me a cuff that comes in more. And it's actually, because when it was only 3/4, it was still pretty wide. And that, of course, is just going to depend on the stretchiness of your fabric. But like I said, this one was a nylon rayon, and nylon spandex, and so it's super stretchy. Now the other thing you could do if you wanted to make this out of a knit, especially if it's a more stable knit, I think you could just make the pattern smaller, and she gives you pretty specific directions on the pattern for how to do that. So just take that into consideration. Take your knit stretchiness into consideration when you decide how to cut your pattern in the first place. This one came out even bigger than I thought it would, so I probably would have cut this one down if I had known it was going to stretch quite that much. Like I said, in a more stable knit, you wouldn't have that problem. In terms of hemming the knit version, I used my cover stitch machine, and again, not the best cover stitch job because it's new and I'm still working on it. I've worked with cover stitch machines plenty before, but you know how different machines are all different. Anyways, so you could also, on a knit, you could conceivably just leave the hem raw. You could just do a straight hem stitch like a regular straight stitch because it doesn't need to stretch or anything, and it's not going to pop when you put it on or take it off. You could use the mitered hem that we did in our first river tunic. That could be really good too. I did not do that on this one, just because I was having a really hard time dealing with this knit and I gave up. I just wanted to get it hemmed. Okay, I think that is it for the river tunic, and that is also it for our Diane Ericson sew along. Next week we are going to be sewing a pattern from Pearl Red Moon. Also, yeah, Pearl Red Moon. I will link her Etsy shop and her website below for you. Next week I think we're going to be doing the Willowra top and dress, but don't hold me to that because I'm not sure. I know it will be a Pearl Red Moon pattern. And also tune in tomorrow. Nope, this is only Tuesday. Tune in on Friday for my next Friday Sews episode. I haven't had one of those for a couple of weeks, and I have a ton of stuff to talk to you about. So hit like, hit subscribe, and please come back and see me on Friday. All right, guys, happy sewing. I'll see you soon.